If you were anywhere near a newsstand, a television set, or, even a water cooler back in May of 2007, you don't just remember the story we're covering today. You lived it.
You really did.
It wasn't just another news cycle. It was a cultural saturation event. It was the kind of story that stopped being about the individuals and started being about us, how we parent, how we travel.
How we consume media, for sure, and how we define safety.
Absolutely.
It really was a defining moment. You look back at the late 2000s, in this case, it just stands out as this singular event. The Daily Telegraph called it the most heavily reported missing person case in modern history.
And
you know what?
Honestly, looking at the stack of files we have here, that might actually be an understatement. It was a global obsession.
It really was. We are, of course, talking about the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And I want to set the ground rules for this deep dive right up front.
Okay.
We are not here to rehash the tabloids. We aren't here to go down those rabbit holes of internet conspiracy forums where, people are analyzing pixels and grainy photos. No, our mission is to cut through all of that noise.
Exactly. The noise is what has made this case so difficult to understand for, 18 years now?
Yeah.
We want to strip all that away.
So where are we getting our information from?
Well, we're basing this discussion on a pretty comprehensive stack of primary sources. We have summaries of the original Portuguese police files, the massive British review known as Operation Grange,
Right.
forensic reports that were often very badly misreported at the time, and the chilling details that have emerged more recently from the German investigators.
So our goal here is to reconstruct the timeline, hour by agonizing hour. We want to look at where the investigation failed, both the investigative failures on the ground and the cultural clashes.
Which were huge.
And we really need to examine the scientific evidence, or sometimes the lack of it, that turned this into a mystery that still haunts the world.
And to do that, we have to start by setting the scene. Because context is everything here.
Yeah.
If you don't get the location, you don't get how this could have happened in the first place. Right. Let's go back to May 2007. We are in Praia da Luz, Portugal. Now, if you haven't been there, paint a picture for us. This isn't some bustling, gritty city.
Oh, far from it. Praia da Luz is a small village in the Algarve region. At the time, the population was only about 1,000 people. It's sleepy, it's sunny.
Picturesque.
Totally. Whitewashed buildings, cobblestones. But crucially, it had a nickname back then. They called it Little Britain.
Little Britain. That says a lot about the vibe right there.
It does. It was incredibly popular with UK tourists. You could walk down the street and just hear English being spoken everywhere. You could get an English breakfast at the cafes. It felt familiar.
And because it felt familiar, it felt safe.
That's the key. It's the kind of place where you instinctively lower your guard because it feels just like home, but, with better weather.
That false sense of security is really so central to the beginning of this story. So into this scene, enter the McCann family. Kate and Jerry, both physicians from Leicestershire.
Yeah, they're there on a spring break holiday. They arrived with a group of friends, 7 friends to be exact. This group would later be dubbed by the media as the Tapa 7.
Right.
It was a large party, multiple adults, 8 children in total. The McCanns had their 3 kids with them. Madeleine, who was 3, just days away from her 4th birthday.
Almost 4.
Yeah. And her younger twin siblings, Sean and Amelie, who were 2.
So they're staying at the Ocean Club Resort. And specifically, they are in apartment 5A. Now, the core mystery, the fact that it's driven 18 years of speculation, documentaries, podcasts, everything, is chillingly simple.
It is.
A 3-year-old girl vanishes from a ground floor apartment while her parents are eating dinner 55 meters away.
55 meters. We're going to come back to that distance a lot.
It's nothing.
It's the length of a swimming pool, basically. It's the distance between a nice dinner with friends and a lifetime of regret.
So let's unpack the geography of apartment 5A. Because when you read the files, the layout of this place, it just matters so much.
It's absolutely crucial. So apartment 5A is a ground floor unit, and it's on a corner of the Villa block. That corner location is vital because it means there's public access from 2 sides.
Okay.
There's a front door that opens onto the street, and then there are patio doors at the back that lead out towards the pool and the restaurant area.
And the layout inside. Where were the kids sleeping?
The children's bedroom was at the front of the apartment, right next to that street side door. The parents' bedroom was at the back. Now, on the night of May 3rd, the parents kept the front door, the street door, locked.
Which makes sense.
Of course. But And this is the detail that has been debated in living rooms for nearly 2 decades. They left the rear patio doors closed, but unlocked.
Unlocked. Well, in today's world, saying that out loud sounds insane.
Yeah.
But in 2007, in Little Britain, in a family resort, why did they do that?
It was purely about logistics. It was about access. The McCanns were dining at the resort's open-air tapas restaurant. That's where the Tapas 7 nickname comes from. And they had this checking system set up with their friends. They didn't want to have to carry a set of keys and walk all the way around the block to the front door every time they did a check.
They just wanted to be able to slip in and out easily.
Exactly. Slip in through the patio doors, check the kids, and slip back out to the dinner table. It was the path of least resistance.
So the unlocked door was about convenience for them.
Yes, it was convenience.
Yeah.
And tragically, it may have been the path of least resistance for someone else, too.
Let's talk about this checking system.
Yeah.
They're at the restaurant. You said it's 55 meters away as the crow flies.
Right. If you walked it, because of the winding path and the landscaping, it's more like an 80-meter walk. It took about a minute or so. They specifically requested a table at the restaurant that had a view of the apartments.
But they couldn't actually see their door, could they?
No, and that's a common misconception. They couldn't see the specific doors of apartment 5A from their table. There was a hedge and a wall in the way. They could see the block of apartments, but not the door itself.
So they aren't watching the door. They can't see if someone goes in or out. They are relying entirely on these physical checks.
Roughly every 30 to 40 minutes, one of the parents from the group would get up, walk back, check their own kids, maybe listen at the window or go inside, and then come back.
It sounds organized.
It does. It sounds like a routine.
And it was a routine they'd been using.
It was. It was a system they had used for the previous nights of the holiday without incident. And on the night of May 3rd, that routine started at 8:30 p.m. 20.30. The children are asleep.
And we know what Madeleine was wearing.
We do, from the reports. She's in those pink and white Eeyore pajamas, short sleeves, frilled hems. She has her favorite soft toy, Cuddle Cat, and a pink blanket on the bed with her.
Okay, so 8:30 p.m., the parents head to dinner. When is the first check?
The first check is at 9:05 p.m. Jerry McCann goes back. He enters through the unlocked patio doors, goes into the bedroom. Everything looks fine. The children are asleep, but he notices something a little odd.
A detail that didn't seem important at the time but becomes huge later on?
Exactly. He specifically remembers leaving the children's bedroom door slightly ajar, just a crack, maybe 45 degrees, to let a bit of light in from the living room.
And when he walks in?
When he walks in at 9:05, the door is wide open.
Okay, so knowing what we know now, that's the first red flag. That's a huge red flag.
In hindsight, yes, it's massive. But at the moment, he thinks, oh, maybe Madeleine got up to use the bathroom, or maybe a draft blew it open. He doesn't panic.
Right.
He just pulls the door nearly shut again, leaves the apartment, and goes back to the tapas bar.
He goes back to his wine and his friends, thinking everything is fine.
Correct. Now, we are entering the critical window. This next hour is where the timeline gets incredibly messy and where the investigation arguably got derailed for years.
You're talking about the Jane Tanner sighting?
Yes. Jane Tanner, she's one of the Tapas 7. She leaves the restaurant just after 9:00 p.m. to check on her own child. At roughly 9:15 p.m., she's walking past the junction near the apartment, and she sees something.
She sees a man.
She describes a man carrying a small child. The child is wearing pink pajamas, she says, with a floral pattern, and the man is walking away from the resort area into the darkness.
And for a long, long time, this was the lead, right? This was the moment everyone focused on.
Oh, it was the smoking gun. It shaped the entire early investigation. Police sketches were drawn up based on Tanner's description, a man with dark hair, beige trousers. They were looking for this man.
They believed this was the moment of abduction, 9:15 p.m.
They were certain of it.
But, and this is the part that just drives you crazy when you look at the files and realize how much time was lost.
Yeah.
This was a massive red herring.
It was a monumental distraction. It took years, literal years. But Scotland Yard, under Operation Grange, eventually identified that man.
And who was he?
He wasn't a predator. He wasn't a kidnapper. He was a British tourist named Julian. He was returning to his apartment from the resort's night creche,
Oh, wow.
carrying his own daughter, who just happened to be wearing pink pajamas.
So the police spent crucial time hunting a phantom. They were looking for a dad putting his kid to bed.
They were, and the implications of that are huge because it means the timeline they were working with, that the abduction happened at 9:15, was just wrong.
Completely wrong.
That window was false. The abductor wasn't leaving then. The abductor might have still been in the apartment or maybe arrived later. The whole focus was in the wrong place.
So let's go back to the real timeline. 9:05, Jerry checks. The door is open. He closes it. 9:15, the false sighting happens. But nobody knows it's false yet. What happens next?
10:00 p.m. This is the moment. Kate McCann gets up to do her check. She enters through the patio doors. She walks toward the bedroom. And immediately she notices the door is wide open again.
The same thing Jerry saw.
Yes. But this time, as she walks towards it, a draft slams the door shut.
Oh.
That stops her in her tracks. A draft means air is moving violently through the room. She opens the door and looks inside. The curtains are blowing. The window is wide open, and the exterior shutter, which is a heavy metal shutter that operates with a strap and should have been locked down,
Yeah.
it's raised all the way up.
And the bed.
Empty. Madeleine is gone. Cuddle Cat is still there on the bed. The twins are still sleeping soundly in their travel cots. But Madeleine is gone.
God, I can't even imagine that feeling. The stomach drop, the absolute panic.
She runs back to the restaurant. Witnesses say she was just screaming, "Madeleine's gone! Someone's taken her!"
Someone's taking it. So right from that first second, she knew it wasn't a case of her wandering off.
The open window and the raised shutter convinced her instantly. A 3-year-old can't raise a heavy metal shutter. It's physically impossible for a child that size to operate the strap mechanism to lift it. Someone else did that.
Okay. Now, just around this same time, 10:00 p.m., there's another sighting. And unlike the Tanner sighting, this one didn't get debunked. In fact, it became much more important years later.
Right. This is the Smith sighting. An Irish family, the Smiths, are on holiday in Praia da Luz. They'd been out in the town for the evening. They're walking home at around 10:00 p.m., and they see a man carrying a young blonde girl in pajamas heading down towards the beach about 500 yards away from the apartment.
And their description of this man was different from the Tanner sighting.
Very different. They said he didn't look like a typical tourist. He didn't look like a loving father comforting a child. The girl wasn't wrapped in a blanket, despite it being a chilly night. She was just hanging there in her pajamas.
And the man himself.
He seemed uncomfortable, awkward, like he was carrying a load he didn't want to be seen with.
And this sighting lines up perfectly with the time Kate discovers Madeleine is missing.
Exactly. If the abduction happened right before 10:00 p.m., this man fits the geography and the timing perfectly. This is now considered by many investigators, especially in Operation Grange, to be the actual observation of the abductor.
So we have a missing child, a frantic mother, a potential sighting. That brings us to a concept that every detective knows, but in this case, it seems like it was totally forgotten. The golden hours.
The golden hours are everything. In a child abduction case, or any homicide really, the first hour, the first 3 hours, the first 24 hours, that is the ballgame.
That's when you solve it.
That is when the trail is hot. That is when the abductor is still moving, still vulnerable. That's when witnesses remember faces clearly. That's when forensic evidence hasn't been trampled by rain or wind or, well, people.
And looking at the logs from that night, the golden hours weren't just lost. They were squandered.
It was a catalog of errors that is just painful to read. The GNR, the local rural police, they arrived at 11:10 p.m. So that's already an hour and 10 minutes after Kate raised the alarm.
Okay, so they arrive. Do they lock down the village? Do they close the roads?
No, they notify the judicial police, the serious crimes unit, but the border police, the people who watch the crossings into Spain, they weren't notified for hours.
And Spain is, what, an hour's drive away from there?
Less, if you drive fast on the motorway. You could be in another country, in a different jurisdiction, before the alert even went out.
Unbelievable.
Furthermore, there were no immediate house-to-house searches. And roadblocks. Roadblocks to stop cars leaving the village weren't set up until 10 a.m. the next morning.
That's 12 hours later.
Exactly. You could be in Lisbon, you could be in Madrid, you could be anywhere by then. The net wasn't just full of holes, it wasn't even cast until the fish had long swam away.
What about the apartment itself? I mean, Crime Scene 101 says you seal the scene, you put up the yellow tape, you don't touch anything.
The report suggests that apartment 5A was treated less like a crime scene and more like a train station waiting room. Before it was sealed off, nearly 20 people had been inside.
20 people.
You had the friends looking for Madeleine, looking under beds, opening cupboards. You had resort staff wandering in and out. You had local police officers walking through.
That destroys any fiber evidence, any footprints, anything.
It gets worse. We have accounts of police officers arriving and dusting for fingerprints without wearing gloves.
You're kidding, without gloves. In 2007, that sounds like something from the 1950s.
It suggests a profound lack of forensic discipline at that initial stage. They were adding their own DNA and prints to the scene they were trying to process. But the detail that shocks most people, the one that makes modern investigators just put their heads in their hands, is what happened to the apartment later.
I read this in the notes and I just couldn't believe it. They rented it out.
They did. The police released the crime scene, and about a month after the disappearance, the resort rented apartment 5A to tourists again.
Wait, so people were holidaying in the room where a child was abducted while the investigation was still officially ongoing?
Yes, families were staying there, sleeping in those beds. It was only sealed off again in August, months later, when the police decided they wanted to do more intense forensic tests.
So think about that. When we talk about DNA evidence found later, you have to ask, whose is it? Who else stayed here? Who sat on that sofa? Who cleaned that floor?
The chain of custody is practically non-existent. It's a disaster.
That is mind-boggling. It essentially renders the crime scene useless for any kind of sophisticated testing down the line.
It severely compromised it, yes. It created this massive opening for defense attorneys later on to say, well, that DNA could belong to anyone.
So early on, the police are scrambling. They've missed the golden hours. The media's arriving in droves. Satellite trucks are parking on the beach. They need a suspect. They need a win.
And they land on Robert Murat.
Who is this guy?
Robert Murat was the classic local eccentric suspect. He was a British-Portuguese property consultant. He lived in a villa called Casa Liliana, which was just 150 yards from apartment 5A.
Okay, so he's close. But why him? Did he have a record? Did he act suspicious?
No, he didn't have a record. He became a suspect essentially because he was there and he was helpful. He spoke fluent English and Portuguese. In the chaos of the first few days, he was translating for the police, translating for journalists.
So he inserted himself into the investigation.
He did, because he wanted to help. But to a cynical detective, that can look like perpetrator returning to the scene behavior.
Right. The guy who's a little too helpful, a little too involved.
Exactly. And you have to remember the Tanner sighting, the one that turned out to be false. That sighting showed a man walking in the direction of Murat's house. So geographically, he fit the profile they had built on bad data.
So they went after him hard.
They dismantled his life. They raided his home. They drained his swimming pool looking for a body. They tore apart his cars. They confiscated his computers. They searched the crawl spaces under his house. The whole 9 yards.
And what did they find?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Not a shred of fiber, not a drop of DNA, not a single witness testimony that linked him to Madeleine. He was innocent.
But the media didn't care about innocent until proven guilty.
Oh, the British tabloids destroyed him. They practically convicted him on the front page. They called him an oddball. They implied he was a pervert. It was a complete character assassination.
But he sued them, didn't he?
He did. He eventually sued for libel and won £600,000 in damages, one of the largest payouts in British legal history because the coverage was so defamatory and utterly baseless.
This Murat situation really highlights a friction in this case, doesn't it? You have the British media, the British family, and the Portuguese police. It feels like a massive culture clash.
It was a collision of protocols, of cultures, of legal systems. The British police and media were incredibly frustrated because the Portuguese legal system relies on judicial secrecy.
Explain that. What does that mean in practice?
In Portugal, the law states you don't share details of an ongoing investigation. You don't hold press conferences every day giving updates. The investigation is secret to protect the integrity of the case.
So the British press sees silence and thinks.
Incompetence
Yeah.
or cover-up. Meanwhile, the Portuguese police, the Polícia Judiciária, or PJ, they felt totally patronized. You had British officials flying in, and one officer later described the British attitude as acting like a colonial power.
Like, step aside. The British are here to solve it.
Exactly. And there was a technological gap, too. The British were used to these huge computer databases, like Holmes, too, that cross-reference clues, phone numbers, names. The Portuguese police in that region were literally piling paper reports into cardboard boxes. They were speaking different languages in every sense of the word.
So the investigation into Murat dead ends. The pressure is mounting. The parents are keeping the story in the news every single day. And then about 4 or 5 months in, the investigation takes a really dark turn. The police stop looking for an abductor. They turn around and look at the parents.
This is the shift to the arguido status. By August 2007, the lead Portuguese detective, Gonçalo Amaral, he developed a new working theory. He convinced himself there was no abduction.
So what was his theory? What did he think happened?
He believed Madeleine died accidentally in the apartment. Perhaps she fell off the sofa, or perhaps the parents gave her too much sedative to help her sleep and she overdosed.
Wow.
And he theorized that the parents panicked, hid the body, and then faked the entire kidnapping to cover up their negligence.
That's a massive accusation.
Yeah.
To go from victims to villains just like that. What evidence do they have to support this?
It hinged largely on two things: dogs and DNA. And this is where we need to be really, really careful with the science, because it was widely and very badly reported incorrectly.
Okay, let's break it down. First, the dogs.
The British police sent over 2 highly trained Springer Spaniels, Eddie and Keela. Now, these aren't your average sniffer dogs. Eddie was a cadaver dog, trained specifically to smell the gases released by human decomposition.
Right, a death scent dog.
Exactly. And Keela was a blood dog, trained to find human blood, even if it had been scrubbed clean.
So what did the dogs do? Where did they find something?
They brought them into apartment 5A. The dogs alerted, meaning they barked or froze to signal a scent behind the sofa in the living room. They also alerted to the curtains. But the most damaging alert, the one that made headlines around the world, was when they inspected the McCann's rental car.
They were now cynic.
Right. The dogs alerted to the key fob and, crucially, to the trunk of the car.
Okay, so the police think, we've got them. They moved the body in the car. But there's a huge timeline problem here, isn't there?
A massive one. The McCanns hired that rental car 24 days after Madeleine disappeared.
Almost a month later.
Exactly. So for the police theory to hold any water, Kate and Jerry would have had to hide a decomposing body somewhere in the resort for 3 weeks, while the world's media was watching their every move, filming them walking to church, filming them walking to the shops, and then somehow dig it up or retrieve it, put it in the car, and dispose of it later.
Which sounds, it sounds physically impossible.
It stretches credulity to the breaking point. Also, we have to talk about what a dog alert actually means in a court of law.
It's not proof.
It's not proof. Cadaver dogs are screening tools. They are not evidence in themselves. A dog can alert to residual scent. If someone had a cut finger a month ago and sat on the sofa, the dog might alert. If a previous tenant had a nosebleed, the dog might alert.
Or if the scent transferred from clothing. They're both doctors.
Exactly. Scent transfer is a real phenomenon. Experts say if you touch a dead body in a morgue, which, as doctors, they have likely been around death in a professional capacity, and then you touch your car keys, the dog might pick that up. It's not proof of a crime at that location.
But the police took it as proof. They took samples from a car and sent them to a lab in Birmingham. And this led to that infamous headline, 100% match.
This was the leak that just poisoned public opinion against them forever. A Portuguese newspaper ran a story saying the lab found a 100% DNA match to Madeleine in the trunk of the rental car.
But that wasn't true.
It was a gross, irresponsible misrepresentation of the science. The lab, the Forensic Science Service in the UK, was using a very specialized technique called low copy number DNA analysis, or LCN.
Okay, let's unpack that. What is low copy number DNA?
So imagine regular DNA testing is like reading a whole book. You have plenty of pages, the text is clear, you know the story. Low copy number is like trying to reconstruct that same story from a handful of shredded confetti you found on the floor.
So you're dealing with a tiny, tiny amount of material.
Exactly. A few cells. It's used when you have a microscopic amount of genetic material. It is highly sensitive, but it's also very prone to contamination and complexity.
So what did the lab actually say? What was the real result?
The forensic expert, Dr. John Lowe, wrote an email that later became public. He explained that the sample from the car was a complex mix of DNA from at least 3 different people. And he specifically said the results were, and I'm quoting here, too complex for meaningful interpretation.
So he couldn't say it was Madeleine.
He explicitly stated, "We cannot answer the question, is the match genuine or is it a chance resemblance?" He said it was just as likely to be a random partial match as it was to be Madeleine's DNA.
That is a million miles away from 100% match.
It's night and day. But the nuance was lost. The headline ran, the narrative shifted, people started looking at the McCanns differently. Why aren't they crying more on TV? Why do they look so cold? Well, the DNA proves it.
And based on this shaky evidence, dog barks, and inconclusive DNA, the police decided to squeeze them.
In September 2007, they formally named Kate and Jerry Arguidos, which means formal suspects, and the police played hardball. They essentially tried to break Kate.
I read about the plea deal. It sounds like something from a movie script, not real life.
It's horrific. They sat her down and they told her, if you admit that Madeleine died accidentally and you hid the body, we will give you a lighter sentence, maybe 2 years. You can go home.
Imagine being a mother. Your child is gone. You're in a foreign country where you don't speak the language, and the police are saying, just say you did it and we'll go easy on you.
It's an impossible, coercive situation. If she confesses to a lie, she goes to jail and the search for Madeleine stops forever. The world assumes she's dead. If she refuses, she risks a murder charge and decades in prison.
What'd you do?
She refused, point blank. She said, I'm not going to lie. But during her interrogation, she did something that people criticized her for heavily at the time. She refused to answer 48 questions.
The no comment strategy.
Yes. She sat through an 11-hour interview and, on the advice of her lawyer, refused to answer direct questions about the night.
Why? You can see why people would ask. If she's innocent, why not just talk?
Because of legal advice. Her lawyer told her the police weren't looking for information, they were looking for confirmation. They were trying to trap her, to twist her words to fit their theory, so she exercised her right to silence. But of course, to the public watching on TV, silence looks like guilt.
But eventually this theory, the parents did it, it just collapsed, right?
It did. The evidence just wasn't there. In July 2008, the Portuguese Attorney General took the pretty significant step of archiving the case. They admitted there was no evidence linking the McCanns or Robert Murat to any crime. The Arguido status was lifted.
So they were cleared.
Legally, yes. Emotionally and reputationally, the damage was permanent. And Gonzalo Amaral, the detective who was removed from the case, he went on to write a book called Maddie, The Truth of the Lie.
Unbelievable.
He doubled down on his theory. The McCanns spent the next decade fighting him in libel courts just to stop the book from being sold.
So the police case is shelved in 2008. The parents are cleared, but scarred. This brings us to a period I call the wilderness years. The official investigation stops, but the search doesn't.
Right, this is roughly 2008 to 2011. The McCanns set up Madeleine's Fund. They were desperate. The police had given up, so they had to hire private investigators. And this opens the door to a really murky, difficult world.
Private investigators.
Yeah.
It sounds like a noir novel, but in reality, it seems like it was a mix of well-meaning pros and total sharks.
It was chaotic. You had firms like Control Risks, which is a legitimate corporate security firm. They did what they could. But then you had these other agencies like Merida 3, a Spanish outfit.
What was their deal?
They were flashy. They held press conferences. They claimed they knew who the kidnapper was and promised to have Madeleine home by Christmas. It was baseless. It was cruel optimism. They found nothing and charged a fortune.
And then there were the outright scams. I wanted to ask you about the matter orientation system. This just sounds bizarre.
Oh, Danny Krugel. This is a prime example of how desperation makes you vulnerable to anything. Krugel was a South African former policeman. He claimed he had invented a device, some mix of quantum physics and GPS, where he could take a strand of hair and locate the person anywhere in the world.
That's not science, that's magic.
It is junk science, complete and utter nonsense. But the McCanns were desperate. They were grasping at any straw they could find. They gave him hair samples. He went to Praia da Luz, walked around with his little machine, pointed at a spot on a beach, and said, "She's here." They dug. There was nothing.
It's heartbreaking. It just illustrates the vacuum left when the official authorities stepped away. The parents were left to fend for themselves in a tank of sharks.
Exactly. But the official authorities didn't stay away forever. In 2011, the momentum shifted back to the UK.
Why 2011? What happened?
Politics and the press. The Sun newspaper ran a massive campaign urging the British government to get involved. The McCanns wrote an open letter to the Prime Minister, David Cameron, and the Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, ordered a review.
And this birthed Operation Grange.
That's right. This is the Scotland Yard investigation. And the scale of this thing was just massive compared to what the PIs were doing.
Huge. By 2024, the cost of Operation Grange had topped £13 million. At its peak, they had dozens of detectives. Their job wasn't just to search, it was to reanalyze every single scrap of paper from the thousands of pages in the Portuguese files. They translated everything, cross-referenced everything, and strategically they shifted the focus right back. They said the parents are innocent, let's look for an intruder.
Right. They concluded the accidental death theory didn't stack up. They focused on abduction by a stranger or a burglary gone wrong. This is when they went back to the Smith sighting, the Irish family we talked about earlier.
And in 2013, on the TV show Crime Watch, they released those EFITs.
Yes. They finally publicly said, forget the Tanner sighting. That was a tourist. Look at the Smith sighting. They released these new sketches of the man the Smith family saw.
Did it lead anywhere?
It generated thousands of calls, but no specific suspect at the time. They also did massive digs in 2014. If you remember the news footage, police in white suits raking through the scrubland around Praia de Luz.
I do remember that. It looked very dramatic.
It was thorough, but it was fruitless. They found nothing.
It felt like Operation Grange was winding down after that. Like it was becoming just another cold case unit. The funding was being cut every year. And then 2020 happened. The German lead.
This is the most significant development since the night she disappeared. In June 2020, seemingly out of absolutely nowhere, German prosecutors in Braunschweig made a stunning announcement.
What did they say?
They said two things. One, we have a prime suspect. And two, we have concrete evidence that Madeleine McCann is dead.
That just hit the world like a ton of bricks. Who is the suspect?
Yeah. His name is Christian Bruckner. He's a German national. And when you look at his profile, it is chilling. He isn't an eccentric local like Murat. He is a predator.
What's his history?
He is a convicted sex offender. He has multiple convictions for child sexual abuse. He was also a drug trafficker and a burglar. But crucially, he was living in the Algarve in Praia de Luz at the time of the disappearance.
Living how? Did he have a house there?
He was a drifter. He lived in a camper van, a distinctive VW Westphalia with a white and yellow paint job. He also had a rundown farmhouse nearby. And his way of making money was breaking into holiday apartments and hotels.
Breaking into apartments, that fits the burglary gone wrong theory perfectly.
It does. And the technology, the phone data, links him to the scene. His cell phone, a Portuguese number, pinged a cell tower that covers the Ocean Club Resort between 7:32 p.m. and 8:02 p.m. on the night of the disappearance.
So he was right there, right when the parents were at dinner, before they even went.
He was in the immediate vicinity. And shortly after the disappearance, he changed the registration of his car, a Jaguar, into someone else's name. He fled back to Germany soon after. All very suspicious behavior.
Was there a confession? Or something close to it?
There was a bragging session. This is what tipped the police off. Years later, in a bar in Germany, Bruckner was drinking with a friend. A report about Madeleine came on the TV. Bruckner allegedly got emotional and made comments implying he knew what happened.
What kind of comments?
One witness, a friend of his, claims he said she didn't scream.
She didn't scream. God, that makes your skin crawl.
Another witness, a former girlfriend, said he told her he had a horrible job to do in Praia de Luz the night before Madeleine disappeared.
So we have motive, which is burglary. We have opportunity, he was there. We have a criminal history of sex offenses. And we have these admissions. Why hasn't he been charged with murder?
That is the tragedy of the no-body case. The German prosecutor, Hans Christian Wolters, has been very open about this. He says he is 100% sure Bruckner killed her. But in the German legal system, without a body or a forensic link that proves death, like a video of the crime or DNA from the murder itself, a murder charge is incredibly hard to make stick.
They need that final piece of the puzzle.
They do. They searched a reservoir recently, didn't they, in 2023?
Yes, the Arade Dam. It's about 31 miles from the resort. Bruckner reportedly called this place his little paradise. Police spent days digging there. Divers went in. They found some items, mostly rags and scraps, but no body. And where's Bruckner now? Is he walking free?
No, thankfully. He is currently in a German prison serving a sentence for the rape of a 72-year-old American woman.
And where did that rape happen?
In Praia de Luz in 2005.
2 years before Madeleine. In the same village.
In the same village, breaking into a home. It establishes his pattern, his MO, perfectly. However, there is a legal clock ticking. He was recently, in late 2024, acquitted of other unrelated sex offenses due to lack of evidence. So once his current rape sentence ends, if they haven't charged him with Madeleine's murder, he could walk free.
That is a terrifying prospect.
It is the race against time that is happening right now in Germany.
I want to zoom out a bit here. We've talked about the clues, the timeline, the suspects. But you can't talk about Madeleine McCann without talking about the media.
It was a phenomenon. I mentioned Princess Diana earlier. This had that same level of global obsession. It really became the first true trial by media of the internet age.
The parents were criticized so heavily for marketing the tragedy. I remember the wristbands, the balloon launches, the posters in every shop window.
They were, but you have to look at it from their perspective. The official police investigation wasn't happening. The only tool they had was visibility. They argued that if people stop looking, you never find your child. They had to keep her face in the public eye.
But the blowback, it was fierce.
It was vicious. The media monstered them, particularly Kate. They analyzed her appearance relentlessly. There was this really ugly, misogynistic undertone to it. They said she didn't cry enough on camera. She looked too controlled. She was cold.
It's that classic trope. If a woman doesn't grieve exactly how we expect her to, messy and loud, she must be guilty.
Precisely. If she cried, she was acting for the cameras. If she didn't cry, she was a cold-hearted monster. She couldn't win. And the tabloids, well, they just started making things up.
Give us an example.
The Daily Express and Daily Star in the UK published over 100 stories that were completely false, just fabricated. Headlines like, "Maddie sold by heart at McCann's." It was pure fiction designed to sell papers.
Do they face any consequences for that?
Eventually, the McCanns sued. The newspapers had to pay £550,000 in damages and print these big front-page apologies. But by then, the stories had been read by millions. The seed of doubt was planted.
And then came social media. Twitter was just starting to take off around 2008, 2009.
It was the accelerant. It was like throwing gasoline on the fire. It allowed conspiracy theorists to bypass any kind of editorial filter. And people started abusing the family directly. There were death threats against the twins, Sean and Amelie, who were just toddlers.
The McCanns testified about this, didn't they? At the Levison inquiry into the press.
Yes. Kate McCann gave this incredibly powerful testimony. She described feeling mentally raped by the coverage. She talked about how a newspaper published her private diary, her most intimate thoughts about her missing daughter, without her permission.
It really holds up a dark mirror to us as consumers, doesn't it? Because we devoured this content. We bought the papers. We clicked the links.
We did. It turned a family tragedy into a spectator sport. We treated it like a crime drama where we were all entitled to a neat ending rather than a real horrific event happening to real people.
So where does that leave us today? Operation Grange is funded through 2026, but it really feels like the end of the line is approaching.
It is winding down. The British police are essentially just supporting the German investigation now. The entire case rests on the German prosecutors finding that one piece of physical evidence, a photo, a scrap of DNA, a witness who finally breaks their silence to link Bruckner definitively to Madeleine.
It's a tragedy of errors, isn't it? When you look back at the whole 18 years.
It is a perfect storm. You had a moment of opportunity for a predator, an unlocked door, a 55-meter walk. You had a botched initial response by police who lost the golden hours. You had a cultural clash that derailed the investigation for years. And you had a media frenzy that generated so much noise, the signal was completely lost.
And at the center of it all, a little girl who is still missing.
And parents who, 18 years later, still keep her room ready. While the German prosecutor is certain she is dead, until there is proof, the McCanns wait. They live in that agonizing, unending limbo.
It really makes you think about the fragility of safety. You go on holiday, you think you're in Little Britain, you think 55 meters is close enough.
It challenges our most basic assumptions about risk. We all want to believe we are in control, that if we are good parents, our kids are safe. But this case reminds us that sometimes chaos only needs a window of a few minutes and an unlocked door.
That is a terrifying thought to end on, but a necessary one. We will be watching the German investigation closely. If there's a break in the case, if that final piece of evidence is found, we'll be back to unpack it.
Until then.
Thanks for listening to this deep dive. Stay safe.
Stay curious and stay critical.